Welcome to this lesson. We're in Vayekel, and that's 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 40 through 50. So I think this week is another good example of how when we pair up the Torah with the Haftarah, we can see some really cool things. Now, obvious connections here. They're both discussing again the houses of God, right? The Torah portion is talking about the items that go into the movable house of God, the tabernacle, and our Haftarah is talking about the items that go into the stationary house of God or the temple, right? And in both of these, the Haftarah and the Torah portion, there's an emphasis on um, the craftsmanship that's needed for the various holy objects in each of those sanctuaries. In the Torah portion, we're going to get a whole lot of details about these objects. But what's interesting, and it seems out of place at first, is that before we get all that detail um, of the making of the holy objects, we have this what seems like a random subject. In Exodus 35 1 and 2, it says, and this is the Torah portion. Moses assembled the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things the Lord has commanded you to do. For 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day shall be your holy day, a day of Sabbath rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it is to be put to death. Do not light a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day." So it, there we're talking about working and not working, right? And all of these places where it says work that's mentioned in that Exodus passage, it uses a particular Hebrew word, melekah. Um, the other Hebrew word that's often translated as work is avad, and that's can be work or service or even worship. But like I said, that's not the one that's in Exodus. It's not avad, it's melekah. Okay, now let's jump back into our Haftarah. And the Haftarah starts out by saying this. And Hiram made the lavers and the shovels and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing all the work that he made King Solomon for the house of the Lord. So here again, just like in the Torah portion about the Sabbath, the word for work in our Haftarah is also melachah. And because of this juxtaposition of the two, there's an oral tradition that defines work, melachah, the things that are prohibited on Sabbath, defined in terms of the activities that were involved in making the sanctuary. Now, we're not going to go into what is work related to Sabbath, just noting that connection, right? Because just as in the making of the tabernacle, the work of the temple from our Haftarah, that also, what we will talk about is how that involves a certain set or a certain amount of skill or competence, and that this skill or competence for the work is given to them by God. Okay. So what intrigued me in this was the word melachah and how it relates to craftsmanship in the tabernacle and in the temple. Um, and my question was, is there a connection between that and our own craftsmanship in our bodies as a temple, right? So what I was looking for here with this word melachah is um, what might be God's practical application that He has for us. Okay, another tie-in with the Torah portion and the Haftarah. They both talk about skilled craftsmen, right? So we've got Bezalel, who is the chief craftsman for the tabernacle, talked about in the Torah portion, and then Hiram, is the craftsman for the items for the temple in our Haftarah. And it said of both of them that the melakah that they would do, the work, was done with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. That's what they were filled with, right? So the work, the melakah, that comes from wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which is only given by God because He alone is the source of those. Now, in Hebrew, wisdom is chokmah, understanding is tevunah, and knowledge is da'at. And these are actually the things that are biblically associated with that term filled with the Spirit, right? And these are, they're God's gifts to us, which means that you and I have access to His wisdom, His understanding, and His knowledge. In 1 Corinthians 12, verse 7 through 8, I got to get my glasses on. It says, 1 Corinthians 12, 7 through 8. Oh my goodness. To each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge according to the same Spirit. Now, Paul prayed that the the believers in Ephesus. So next we're going to read Ephesians 1:17, and Paul had prayed um, that they would also be blessed with wisdom and knowledge through the Spirit. And that says, "May God give you a spirit of wisdom, of the revelation of the knowledge of Him." And then he also prayed that the Colossians would be filled with the knowledge of God's will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. That's Colossians 1 9 and 10. And that they might be encouraged in the full measure, the full assurance of understanding, resulting in a true knowledge of God's mystery, that is, Messiah Himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And that is Colossians 2, verses 2 and 3. Now, the sages also teach that just as the skilled craftsmen built the tabernacle and the temple with Chokmah, Tevunah, and Da'at, so too God made the universe with those same. So the Midrash says, see what Bezalel did, whom the Holy One granted wisdom, as it says in Exodus 31:1, I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, and knowledge. With these three things, the Holy One created his universe, as it's written in Proverbs 3:19 and 20. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. By knowledge, the deeps were broken. And with these same three, Bezalel in the tabernacle. Likewise, the temple was built by these three, as it's written in 1 Kings 7:14. He was filled with the wisdom and understanding and skill. So too the temple of the future will be built with these three, as it's written in Proverbs 24:3 and 4. By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it's established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. So, it makes sense, right? That creation and the temple, the tabernacle, um, had to be fashioned using those same, the same essence, right? Because each are the setting in which mankind can recognize and serve and worship God, right? And because we're in God's image, we're made in the image of God, and our bodies are like mini temples. Our melachah, our work, is in the arena that we're given by God in which we transform the world. Y- You've heard the phrase tikkun olam, repair the world. And we become partners with him in this way in the work of recreation. Um, a famous rabbi from the second century, Rabbi Akiva, um, he says that God deliberately left the world unfinished so that it could be completed by the work of us with him, which I think is really cool. So, this creative God of ours seeks creativity from mankind. But what kind of creativity? Well, the kind that brings heaven down to earth. So, you and I, we have a special job that we need to do. We have a special mission. And it's something that, here's the thing, this mission is something like your mission is something that only you can do. Only you can accomplish that. Whatever your mission is, your work, this melakah, that is your craftsmanship, your creativity. And I think it's really telling. So I'm still stuck on this word melakah, right? And I think it's really telling that melakah means occupation, or it means business, or it means workmanship, but it also has the same root as malak, which is the word used for messenger, and it's the word used for angel, right? So anyone who carries a message, um, and that's someone who comes in the authority of another. So you're a messenger for somebody else, right? So our work, the what we're called to do, right, is also a form of message bearing, which I think is kind of cool. So the question then that we would ask ourselves is, what message does my work say about the goodness of God? And again, that message is only one that you can bring. The particular way that you bring that, only you can do that. Um, Rabbi Manis Friedman, um, he's a fairly, I don't know if I call him famous, but he's like alive now. He's living now. Um, he has this really wonderful way of explaining um, his perspective on something. He says that there's a difference between existence and life. Okay, so to exist, he says, means to occupy space, right? And that's conditional. So in order to exist, you've got to eat, you've got to drink, you've got to breathe, you've got to have safety, right? All those things that any creature needs for survival. That's existence. We all share that in common. But life, well, that's something else. Um, that is, you know, God gave mankind something else besides existence, right? On day 6, that doesn't depend on any outside conditions. Um, Rabbi Friedman calls this life, that thing that's different that God has given mankind. You've heard me call it before, us being a day 6 2.0 creature, right? We have these things in common with all the other animals, but we have something different. And I say it's the breath of God, that divine spark in us. What Rabbi Friedman is saying is that's life, different from existence. So God gave us life. And what is life? It's the effect that something that exists has on its surroundings. Okay. So life is that contribution that we make to the world. Life is what we do for the kingdom. Now, Rabbi Friedman, he gave an example relating to water and fire, and he says they both exist, they both take up space, but the contribution of fire, like the life of fire, isn't the same as water. Fire gives light, it gives warmth, it causes things to come apart, right? Water makes things grow, keeps things cool, um, binds things together. Now, when he used those examples, and um, he also used an example of a rock, you know. At first, I thought it was sort of arbitrary that he was, using these elements of water and fire. And then I got to thinking about it, and I realized, well, I mean, actually, those are good. I mean, they're just examples, but they're good examples because um, the Spirit of God is depicted as fire and water, right? So I like his examples for the different ways that you and I can express life, right? So your life, my life, by this definition, is the unique contribution of Melakah that you and God partner together to do. So if you're water, don't waste your life trying to be fire. Because if God didn't design you to be fire, then he's not going to partner with you in that, is he? So if you go off that and onto that path, the best that you could ever hope is that you would be doing whatever that is on your own, but it would be without him. And no one of us can survive without him, right? And our melakah, if it's not what was intended for us, that's just going to burn as stubble, right? Now, when I think about the skilled craftsmen that worked on the sanctuaries, how they emulated God in wisdom and knowledge and understanding, and how they partnered with him in building the meeting places between man and God, I'm inspired to create too. But I see this word, this idea of creativity, different now, and I see it as bringing heaven to earth through my creativity, my life, not existence, that God gave me. So if I'm water, I want to do the melakah of water with God, with his wisdom and his understanding and his knowledge, right? Now, I don't say this lightly. I didn't have this resolve that I do right now just a few hours ago, okay? So, full honesty here. A few hours ago, I was um, a complete mess. So this morning, and I'm sharing this with you because not because I like to talk about these things, but because I think that I mean, hopefully it will resonate with you. So just this morning, I was doing one of those this terrible thing that I sometimes do to myself, and I was mentally beating myself up. Get this, for all the things that I cannot do that others can do. I, I know it's a terrible thing to let those thoughts in and then sort of stay with them, right? Some of you maybe have heard me before say, "Don't believe every stupid thing you think," right? But this morning, that's where I was. I was believing those stupid thoughts, and I was down on myself for like some specific things this morning. Um, Most of them had to do with this idea of creativity. So one of them, okay, I'm not musical, and I can't sing. I can't even carry a tune in a bucket, as they say. And even if I could sing, I can't remember lyrics well enough to be able to sing along a song. And I was reflecting on, uh, I laugh now, but it was really hard this morning. I was reflecting on how super uncoordinated I am. I've got really bad handwriting. It's messy, and that kind of translates over into artwork, like my painting abilities. I've recently picked up watercolor painting. Kind of, I was trying to give myself a new hobby. So I picked that up, and I'm terrible at it. Now, intellectually, I know that the reason I'm terrible at it is because I'm a beginner and I've never really done anything like that before, even when I was younger. But this morning, I was focusing on the terrible part and not the beginner part, right? So, so I was crying. I was crying to God that I'm not creative in these ways. And then, for good measure, I also lamented that I'm like Moses and I'm slow of speech, but I don't have Moshe's good qualities. So I can't speak well spontaneously in groups of people. And I- spontaneously sharing my faith verbally, I can't. I'm not gonna say I can't do it. I'm not good at it. Um, by the way, these videos, that's not me necessarily always speaking spontaneously because I do have them heavily outlined and I gather my thoughts down. I put my thoughts into words before, like words on paper before I speak them. See? So yeah, this morning was a big pity party, um, and I was focusing on all the things that I cannot do for the kingdom. And I wonder, have you ever been there before? Probably. But at the core of um, what it was that I wanted is that I wanted to be like my heavenly daddy, the creative one, right? I want to create beauty to share with others. And that's what I was just sort of randomly focusing on this morning. I don't want to just pass on information. I want to create, to bring down heaven to earth. And so after I was through crying out my heart to God, I asked him to help me to create the message. Create, right? The message for this lesson. Now, I'd already done a little bit of research on the Haftarah already, but I didn't yet have a clear message of what to bring. I was stuck. Let's just call it that. And I said that I didn't want to do it without him. I didn't want to just pass on cool, interesting information about the Haftarah, right? I wanted to co-create with him something that was completely new, where he and I were involved in it together, right? And so I find it really interesting that God just sort of guided me through this to pray this morning. And then he ended up giving me the desire of my heart with this lesson. Um, so what I pray for you all is that you're catching the beauty of what I saw in this Haftarah and the creative work of Melakah and how your life and your contribution to the world, when it's done with God, that's exactly what the world needs. And they need it from you and no one else. They don't need it from anyone else. And so with this lesson just today, God showed me that I can be water with him or I can be fire alone without him. So, are you fire? If you are, go be that, right? That's your Melakah contribution. And it's something that only you can do with him. In that case, don't try to be water, right? So I have a couple of challenges for you and for me this week. Now, I don't know where you're at on this creativity spectrum, and I don't know to what degree that you struggle with like not being enough when it comes to Melakah that we're called to do. But I want you to do something this week, and I'll do it too. I want you to think about creativity in a different way. I want you to think about it in terms of what I've taught about Melakah, that shared work that we do with God. And I want you to focus, and I'll I'll do it too. Don't focus on the product. so much as the experience of doing whatever that work is with God. Because when we try to compare our work with someone else's and we think their work looks more shiny, if our work is with God, then what we're comparing is with God versus not with God, right? So we're going to want the with God. So don't focus on the product so much, is that partnership with God. And then I want to encourage you to first ask for his wisdom and his understanding and his knowledge when it comes to the melakah of your life, not your existence, right? So, wisdom, understanding, knowledge. The Hebrew of these words are really loaded. They're wonderful, and we could spend hours digging into them, which might be actually kind of fun to do at another time. But for now, just know that God knows what they mean, right? Even if maybe you and I don't quite understand the full aspect of these of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. God knows, right? But we do know that they're components of the melakah of creating that holy space between God and humans, right? From the tabernacle and the temple. So pray first for wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And ask God to show you your unique work that only you can do, that you two partner together on. The emphasis, what this is what God was showing me, the emphasis is on the partnering with him, right? And that's not your existence, that's your life. So maybe it's things that what he'll show you, maybe that's things that you're already doing, but you didn't realize that that's melakah unto God. And maybe he'll show you something completely new. Sometimes we have not because we ask not. And maybe it is craftsy or it's artsy or maybe it's not even something that you would consider creative in the usual sense, right? Because to be creative, it means to create, to make, to fashion something that wasn't there before that creation, right? Now, I'm not saying make something out of nothing because only God can do that, but I'm saying bring forth something out of materials, bring forth something new that wasn't already there. Now, I think uh, here's the simplest example I can think of, okay, to illustrate this point. And it's simple and it's small in effort that it would take. And that would be to offer a smile to someone who could use a smile, right? And then watch, when you smile and they smile back, you're creating, watch the creation, right, of the smile on their face. And that's something that we can all do, right? I mean, even on the worst days when like me this morning, when we think I can't do anything for God, we can make someone smile, right? That's a creative act. And maybe that person that needs to smile is you, right? So I want you to think about when you think about, what is your work? What is your creative act that you partner with God with? Think about something as simple as smiling. Because making someone else smile, that's no less creative and wonderful than those so-called big things that others are doing, right? Do you realize what just in smiling and being kind to somebody, causing them to smile, do you realize what you and God are doing together? So when somebody smiles, the body releases endorphins and dopamine and serotonin, right? So those are the feel good neurotransmitters that bathe your brain and they elevate your mood and they alleviate stress and they relax the body, right? So give it a try because that's also bringing heaven to earth. I don't think I'll ever see Melakah the same way. And I'm very thankful to God for helping me to understand that today. And I hope that you never will see the work that you do the same way. I pray that you always and forever now will see Melakah as an opportunity to be a craftsman, the same as Hiram from our Haftarah, Bezalel from the Torah portion, creating with God that sacred meeting place. Because your work, my work, our life is just that important. So I'll see you next week in the next Haftarah.